Hello and welcome to the official F14 Tomcat radio show, straight out of Naval Weapons Industrial Reserve Plant Calverton, Grumman Calverton, that is. I'm the show's producer. My name is Lorenzo. I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. We have an absolutely amazing show tonight. Our guest is Commander Tom Bush, call sign JEETER. He's VF-84 Jolly Rogers and VF-32 Swordsman before he went over to the dark side. Also, had to add that in there. Sorry about that, JEETER. But also, our host tonight, we have Executive Officer Gerald Leakey, call sign Leakster from VF-102 Diamondbacks. Good evening.
Hey, good evening. Happy to be here.
Sitting in the back seat, we got Lieutenant Eric McMullen, Lieutenant Commander Eric McMullen, call sign Siphon, VF-31 Tomcatters.
Thank you for the demotion, but I guess I was flying up when I was a lieutenant, so that counts.
You'd all rather be lieutenants anyway, right?
Right. Let me fly and stay lieutenant. I'll do it.
We're also joined by Ray Borelli, VF-11 Red Ripper PC, also Grumman Final Assembly for the F-14 Tomcat at Plant 6. Good evening, Ray.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Gentlemen, it's going to be an absolutely amazing show. We're all looking forward to it. Let's get underway.
Well, hey guys, it's awesome to have you here, JEETER. We just heard a little bit about your history a little bit in the pre-show. Always good to know a little bit about you, and I know you and Leakster have some history too. So I'll get out of the way. You should probably introduce some more.
Well, I think the most interesting thing about our history that JEETER and I both have in common is that we were NAVCADs, and we were fortunate enough to get our commission through that program. And I'd rather just have Tom just start up and tell us, what you have a real kind of Grumman history running through your bloodstream there. So why don't you tell us about your whole background there, Tom?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Leakster. Just real quick on the NAVCAD program, NAVCAD, Naval Aviation Cadet, what it was and what it did is it took somebody either from the enlisted ranks, which was my case, or straight off the street, as in Leakster's case, and you didn't necessarily have to have a college degree to fly a Navy airplane. So what you needed was at least 60 college credits. You didn't have to have a degree of any sort. You had to be between 19 and 24, unmarried with no kids. So George Bush, number 41, the original, George Bush, if you will, he was one of the earliest NAVCADs back in World War II. So it's a program that was used on and off all through the early 90s. And I want to say it went away right around 1994 and was replaced by the Seaman to Admiral program as a commissioning source for folks like us. So great program. And one of the greater things about it, was that it was a pilot only program. So if you were a Navy guy coming in looking to fly fighter jets and you went in through the Naval Academy or ROTC, there was no guarantee you were ever going to see a Navy airplane. You could have been selected for submarines or ships or something like that. The NAVCAD program was a pilot only program. So that's what was really neat about it. So both he and I are fortunate to have done that. Wouldn't change a thing. So Tom Bush, JEETER, grew up in Long Island, about 10 miles from where they built these things. At the time I was growing up, my dad was a car mechanic. I worked in his auto shop when I was a kid, racing motocross on the side and driving hot rods and chasing girls and doing all the things that young Long Island boys ought to be doing at that age. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I was the second of 4 kids. My family really didn't have the socioeconomic background, if you will, to send me to college. I was a kid with a lot of energy, but not a lot of direction. So in high school, I joined the Navy, enlisted. The standard deal where the recruiter comes around while you're in high school as a senior and tells you to come in and take tests and you're the greatest thing in the world, and come on into the Navy and you can do this and that. And so it was pretty intriguing to me. So I took the nuke power test on their urging and passed it. Ended up going in originally as a Navy nuke, as they called them, and that was 2 years of schooling altogether, and followed by about 2 years on a ballistic missile submarine based out of Groton, Connecticut. So the submarine itself was actually in Holy Loch, Scotland, but you did your off-crew periods in Groton, Connecticut. So 2 years of schooling, 2 years of nuke power, 2 years on the submarine deploying. While I was going through all this schooling as an enlisted guy, starting out in 1986 in Great Lakes, Illinois, started taking flying lessons on the side. So I was 18 at the time. I fell in love with flying and realized that, wow, if I can do this for a career, that would be the cat's meow, you know. So what else came along in 1986 in the summer, if anybody remembers?
Isn't that the year that, like, right before the year the Cocktail came out, I think?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that movie came out, and here I am. I'm probably just soloed at that point. You know, I'm away to the private pilot license as an enlisted guy, and Top Gun comes out, and I'm like, whoa, they built that thing 10 miles from where I grew up, and if I could do that, that would be the thing, right? And so all of my energy then got directed, you know, to that end, and it took several tries, several fits and starts. Applied for ROTC, didn't get it. Applied for Naval Academy from the enlisted ranks, didn't get it. And then I did it again, didn't get it. And then finally learned about this NAVCAD program. And by now it was 1988 to 89, actually. Learned about the NAVCAD program. And if you think about it at the time, this was right towards the end of the Ronald Reagan buildup to the 600-ship Navy. You know, we're trying to break the back of the Soviet Union at this point, and we're really building up our military forces, especially our naval forces. And luckily, I was kind of a part of that. Otherwise, there's no way they would have ever let an enlisted nuke guy, pretty hard to come by, go over to be an aviator, you know. So luckily for me, I was able to get it into the program in late 89. I came off of my last submarine deployment and learned that I'd gotten picked up for NAVCAD. And by that time, I had about 500 hours in my my commercial and multi-engine license on the civilian side. And so starting flight school in January of 90, or AOCS at first in January of 90, you know, I think I had a leg up. There were some that would tell you that having prior flight time was a hindrance. Others would tell you it's a saving grace, and I'll tell you it's probably somewhere in between. You know, I think it helped me, but the advantage that you had going in with prior flight time was probably mostly gone by the time you certainly got to jets. You know, and you're doing the formation stuff and the bombing stuff and everything else. So it was leg up at first, but you know, kind of flattened out after a while. So I went through Whiting Field, so AOCS in Pensacola, Whiting Field for T-34s, and then got selected for jets and went up to Meridian, Mississippi for jet training. Flew the A4 and actually the T2 and the A4 at the time, and got winged in December of 91 after doing my carrier qual stuff on the USS John F. Kennedy. So I didn't know it at the time, but I'd later, you know, 13 years later, I do the final cruise on that ship.
Wow.
Before she was put to bed, no IF, and once again, I didn't know it at the time. And she's sitting in the naval shipyard in Philadelphia now as a decommissioned ship. So Leekster and I, when we fly into Philly on final, the 27 right, for our airline jobs, we fly right over the John F. Kennedy on 3-mile final there. You know, so it's a piece of history every time I go over her.
I was on the Kennedy for a while.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, you know, it was Leekster. I will credit him for NAVCAD. He is an eloquent dude in his characterization of what the Kennedy looks like. And do you remember what you said, Leekster?
No, I don't remember that one. Maybe if you remind me, it'll come back to me.
But I do. But I do. It was so eloquent. And you're an eloquent dude. And what you said, it looks like the rotting corpse of an apex predator.
That's right.
Interesting.
That is so. That's NAVCAD eloquence right there. That was fantastic. You know,
Yeah,
it's really so true.
It is. It's interesting. I love flying on that approach into Philly because before the Kennedy was there, the America was there, which was my ship. So for years, and I did land on the Kennedy just like you in the A4. So it's pretty neat to see those ships. It's sad to see them when they don't turn them into museums. They can't turn every ship into a museum. And the America was kind of a shame. And I remember saying once too about the museums, the carrier museums, that they're kind of like a haunted house in a way, right? They're still a ship, but they don't feel alive to me. You know, a museum, it feels like it's lost its spirit. You know, when you're on a carrier and it's 5,000 people and the airplanes are taxiing around on the deck and you always hear some noise in the background. It's a living entity. it's a completely different experience when you go on board a museum, although you still have the smell a little bit. There's a few things that remind you. It's just not quite the same as when you're living on it. It's odd.
I know what you mean. We cross-decked over to the Forrestal, and getting aboard there as a young man was, they'd say it was haunted all the time, and we'd hear things and all that. And but yeah, I know what you mean.
So Jeter, you get your wings there, and then you put out your dream sheet, which is what we all like. You get to about 10 picks, and you're hoping you get one of your first couple picks, and that goes by grades usually, and you're just hoping for that jet that you always wanted, right? So when you laid out your dream sheet, how'd that go?
Yeah, so check this out, and I'm not to, this is a Tomcat podcast, right?
Right. So, there you go. We can toot our horn.
Well, check this out. So I hate to disappoint in what I'm about to say, but believe it or not, I put my first choice as Hornets, and I'll tell you why in a second, but I'll also tell you why the fact that I got Tomcats was a fantastic thing. Okay. When I got in, I shot a lot as a kid growing up. My dad had guns. I'd go to upstate New York, and we do a lot of shooting. I loved marksmanship, and I loved, therefore, when I was going through the A4 training, we dropped bombs. We dropped these 25-pound practice bombs, and they were purely ballistic. There was no smart mechanism to them at all. You were purely, you had to be on your parameters. You had to be smooth if you wanted to target, right? And so it was a fun exercise, and I did pretty well at it. And I just loved bombing, trying to put a piece of ordnance on a target in an airplane doing 500 miles an hour or 500 knots, was quite a challenge, and I just loved it. And so the Tomcat at the time was a pure fighter. I loved the Tomcat as far as it's the sexiest airplane ever made. I'll say that now. It's still true. But I wanted the bombing mission, and so my first choice was Hornets because hey, it was a bomber, right, and a fighter. So I got Tomcats. Was not disappointed in the least. I mean, not yeah, but hey, I wouldn't be able to bomb. Well, it so turns out that 8 months later, when I started the F14 RAG, and then several months after that, I became the second class in the Tomcat to actually go to a strike det and do bombing in Fallon, as a RAG student. So that all worked out for me. I got to use this thing. The Tomcat, as we know, was designed to bomb right from the get-go, but it just wasn't employed like that, and it was a damn good bomber. And not only was it a good bomber, but it could haul more than anything we had, we
were absolutely the best in the air wing by the time we were flying it. So yeah,
by the time you got the lantern on that thing and whatnot, which was just coming as I left the community, then it was just a absolute kick-ass.
I think that it was something that people don't often consider is the bring back capability as well.
It's huge.
And that you can't stay in business very long if every time you launch off the ship, if you can't bring those bombs back aboard, if you don't use them, and you have to dump them in the ocean. Right. And the Tomcat had the capability to bring the ordnance back to the ship if it wasn't needed, which is really key, I think.
Yep.
Interesting.
Totally was.
Hey, Jeter, I'm curious if I could step back to your pre-flying days. I just have a question. So, growing up on Long Island, do you remember the Tomcat when it started flying? Do you remember those days? I mean, you were pretty young, but
I do. From a almost ethereal perspective, that I knew that they had this Grumman weapons plant, just for starters, Grumman, and I just knew as institutional knowledge as a Long Islander that Grumman was Long Island's biggest employer, and it was that at least World War II time, all through around or about the mid 80s.
Yeah.
I think, at least the mid 80s. And so as a Long Islander, that's most of the people you knew worked for Grumman or knew somebody that worked for Grumman, and they had the Calverton final assembly plant. They had the Bethpage plant were the two mainstays there, and just employed huge numbers of people. And it was a very family atmosphere. Not only was the company, from what I came to know, a very family atmosphere, but everybody that that worked for it spoke of it as such, you know? So if there's a linkage to it, I would say it's that, just the knowledge that the company that powers most of Long Island, where I lived and grew up, was Grumman, you know?
Yeah.
And I knew about the airplane, the F-14, and you would see it, you would hear it, you would hear the sonic booms, and I didn't know it at the time as a kid growing up, but and I don't think it's there anymore. But later on, once I started flying at age 18 and studying aeronautical sectional charts and learning what all the things meant on them, I would see there was this narrow rectangle of a strip that was actually a little supersonic corridor that they had. It was either over the Long Island Sound or just south of Montauk. I forget which, if it was on the north side of like north of Orient Point, Long Island, or the other side. I think it was north of Orient Point. It was this narrow rectangular strip that they would do their test runs in.
It's for acceptance testing, I assume.
Yeah, or just maybe their own shakedown testing, test fly airplanes. Once again, I didn't know this at the time, but that's where they did a lot of that stuff.
Nice.
So you must have known, I mean, people that were bringing their cars into your dad's shop were probably people that were building the airplanes, I would imagine.
In many cases, yes. And, and I had a good friend whose dad built the landing gear on the thing. And he ended up hooking me up with a tour later in life, June of '92, 3 days before I was to get married in Connecticut, to my wife, who's sitting over in the other room. So it's original issue.
Nice.
She she was in Connecticut there, and anyway, I got a tour of the plant, and I don't know if you could see this on the card, but
put it like real close to the camera.
Yeah, it's
maybe farther away. That's not helping either.
Yeah, so it says Lieutenant Tom Bush. I'm actually an ensign because I was a NAVCAD. So that's one thing about being a NAVCAD is you don't get your commission until the day you get your wings, and so all your buddies that work, had their college degrees when they started, they got their commission the day that you graduated AOCS. Whereas you didn't get your commission until the day you got your wings. And so being about 2 years behind all your contemporaries as far as rank goes. So anyway, I do this tour that my buddy hooked me up with, and I'm only an ensign there, even though I think says lieutenant, and I'm getting this royal treatment like I'm somebody, right? I'd never touched the airplane yet, never sat in one. And they're treating me like royalty. So just like I heard a similar story about Leakster getting the same, even more.
Same experience. I was an ensign, but I did have, you and I both had our wings, so we could call ourselves naval aviators, but we were certainly not fleet naval aviators by any stretch. We'd only flown orange and white airplanes, so a gray airplane was really something special for us to be close to, and we just were licking our chops. We couldn't wait. We were dying to get in those airplanes.
Yep. Yeah. So it was.
And so you were there. Do I understand you were there for the very last jet coming off?
So it was a little bit sad at the time, and just to see that they had the whole final assembly floor filled up with the last batch. I don't know, it was 15, 20 airplanes in there that were the F-14D retrofits. So I think all the new production Ds had already come and gone, and they were doing the retrofits, as you remember, of select models. And it was very neat to see the airplanes going through this. They also
how interesting that the one that I went to in Calverton was the acceptance there, where the Navy took delivery of the very first D, and I was there and got to meet Tom Conley and all this. It was just mind blowing, right? And then and we've been friends all these years now, and you were there for the last one. I had no idea until today that was
right
that we had that in common.
And I got to fly both of those jets.
I know, that's
Thank you very much for touring my jet.
Never flew the B, wished I would have. I flew the B a few times in the RAG, but as we'll get to, I was mostly an A guy in the fleet, which, as you know, they were just completely different airplanes.
Yeah. And before we step away from the last jet coming off the line thing, Ray, I'm just curious, do you remember that day?
I wasn't there. I had left before that. Yeah, I left before that. When I started hearing the rumbling of, I was night shift for final assembly. I'd work, I think it was 5:30 to 2 or something like that. And we started hearing I mean, I don't know if they heard it, in the day shift, but at the night shift, there was a lot of rumor stuff because, things were a little slow or whatever. And I started hearing about it. And I talked to my dad about it, and he's like, no, that'll never happen. And, my dad was with Grumman for 51 years, so it was his everything. And then, I just felt it, and I resigned, and then I was working autoclave down at Eastern Airlines down in Miami, as you know.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But no, it was a great experience, even as a kid. You talk about Tom from Long Island. As you guys know, I'm from Bayshore, and I grew up. I was born into Grumman, and grew as a young man into Grumman, and that was my plan, was to go in the Navy to learn metalsmith. I went to A school in Memphis and got signed on with the Rippers, and was plane captain, corrosion control, then airframe, and did a little troubleshooting on the flight deck as a trainee. And then, unfortunately, or fortunately, my plan was to get out and work for Grumman and live happier ever after. And 3 years into final assembly, it was kind of crackling down, and I went a different direction.
I know Lorenzo can rip off the number of Tomcats. Was it 671? Is that right? I don't know. Something like that. Yeah, I'm sure everyone, I don't.
Was it in the 600s?
Definitely.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, he's hiding back there somewhere making a pot of coffee, but I think it was something like that. But that was just a huge amount of airplanes. I mean, if you think about that, a ton of them.
Yeah. Yeah. There he is. He's gonna pipe in.
712 Tomcats.
700. I'm mixing up the numbers.
712. Okay.
And the last PU, I believe, was 164,604 was Vandy one. I think
That sounds right.
It's 101 was 603, which was the last fleet airframe.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, Jeter, so after you got selected for Tomcats, went to the RAG, did A's because that's what there was then. B's were just coming out, right? And D's were
out already.
Yep. D's were out and D's were coming off the line. Yeah, there we go.
So I'll back up a little bit. So here I was, got winged in December of '91, and then whereas I spoke about how I was a product of the 600 ship Navy and the massive buildup, right? Well, that was in '89 when I got picked up. So here it is 2 years later, and I get winged on or about the 20th or 21st of December '91, and now I'm home on 2 weeks of Christmas leave. And I and everybody, all 20 guys in my winging class, get a letter from Training Wing 1 in Meridian, Mississippi, basically a offer to voluntarily, hey, if you want to get out of the Navy, no questions asked, no obligation, we're looking for volunteers, right? Wow. And what do we have here? We've got the beginning of the drawdown, the peace dividend of the early 90s, peace breaking out everywhere, as we would jokingly say. And they were looking to trim down. I only know one guy out of my class anyway that took that offer and got out, and all the rest of us stayed in. So there were delays in the training pool at the time. So I had about 8 months of what they call stash time, just waiting to start my next phase of training, in this case, the Tomcat RAG. So as a NAVCAD, I didn't have my degree, and you didn't have to get your degree at any time. That's a common misnomer. A lot of people say, well, you got to get your degree at some point. Well, no, you don't. And I know plenty of NAVCADs that had quite successful careers and retired without ever getting a degree, but nonetheless, it makes you more competitive to do so. So I went and kept on chipping away at my degree using that stash time. I was flying part-time as at the flight instructor training unit back at Whiting while I went to University of West Florida for 2 semesters and banged out like 20 credits a semester or so to keep on progressing towards the degree, so, and I would eventually end up finishing my degree through Embry-Riddle off extended campus in '96. But nonetheless, just, showcasing, making use of some time there. So August of '92 comes around. I'm in Virginia Beach. I check into the Tomcat RAG, and things are still off to a slow start there. I'm doing the classroom work. CBTs or computer-based training were pretty new at the time. for the Tomcat, but I thought it was pretty neat.
And I'm sure incredibly entertaining.
Oh yeah. I remember sitting there waiting for you click on a module and, think of the speed of computers in 92 and how long it takes for a courseware to load and things like that. But I still thought it was pretty whiz bang, to use graphics and stuff like that at the time.
Oh, we thought it was awesome, man.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'd never seen anything like it. I was so excited. Look at that. You can see how the hydraulic system works. And it was amazing. Yeah.
Nice.
So
by the time I went through, it was hours a day, and we couldn't get out of it quickly enough.
So I didn't actually end up getting in the airplane until early 93. I can look at my logbook. I don't remember the exact day, but early 93, I'm in there for my first FAM flight. And as most Tomcat guys know, or every Tomcat pilot knows, but many folks listening to this may not know, is there is never a single Tomcat built with dual controls. Unlike almost every variant of other airplanes, you have the training version or you can modify it with a stick. Not the Tomcat. There was never a single Tomcat built with two controls. So your very first flight as a Tomcat pilot, you were it. So the first two flights, the first two FAM flights, as we call them, familiarization flights, you had a pilot in the back, but all he could do was basically two things: yell at you or pull you or eject you.
Eject.
So
that was as we called it in the RAG, we called it the Rio appreciation hop for
big time. And I ended up, later on, I ended up flying a few seats in the back, and I felt like a fish out of water back there.
Right?
Way too many circuit breakers and just too much stuff to do. So good on you guys for doing what you did. Anyway, the first two FAM flights, it was just an amazing experience. Of course, you got to go supersonic on your very first flight just because, right?
Totally.
And the one thing that was also neat to me, and you hear it all the time, you've seen Top Gun however many times by the time you're flying the airplane for the first time. Zone 5 afterburner. What does that really mean? Well, it literally means there are 5 zones to the afterburner. At the throttles, you literally feel, doop, 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 all 5 zones kick in individually, is sequential. And that's on the A and the A only. When you went to the B and the D with the bigger motors, it was just a smooth progression. You didn't feel the individual zones. So anyway, it's totally.
You on a Whiskey 72, I'm assuming?
Whiskey 72 out over the water. So you're on the East Coast, take off out of Virginia Beach, Oceana Naval Air Station, and you basically point to the east, and you're a nominal 50 to 150 miles off the coast out over the water when you're doing this. And so for me, trying to remember, I don't think it was, but dry suit weather. So for anybody listening to this, not familiar, if you've ever seen what a dry suit looks like that a diver uses, it's pretty much like that. And if the air and water temperature meets certain conditions, you actually have to wear this survival suit because you'd only last a few minutes in the water if you had to eject. And so you have to wear this thing underneath all your gear, your G suit, torso harness, all this other stuff. And very constricting, kind of tough to wear. And I think my very first flight was in a dry suit, if I'm remembering correctly. So not
it's awful, man. It's like people always think it looks cool to wear a spacesuit and all that, but it's when you're wearing all that stuff with the dry suit and you can't even climb the ladder to get in the cockpit.
Yeah, you can barely
that's how constricted it is. It's awful. And trying to practice dogfighting while you're wearing one of those things is nuts, but
I'm sure that's why we went to Key West, so we would never have to wear dry suits for the dogfighting stuff.
Yeah.
So went through the RAG, and to go back to the whole bombing thing, was delighted a couple months in to find out that the first class ahead of me went and bombed, and then I was the second class to go to Fallon and drop bombs in this thing. And we dropped live bombs and all kinds of inert bombs and heavy stuff, and it was just it was kick butt. I've got several pre-digital age photos of that detachment, and just came to also I didn't think much of Fallon, Nevada the first time I went out, high desert,
Right.
very small town, not much to do. And, from having grown up on the East Coast and trees and things like that. But I'll tell you, the flying was awesome right off the bat, just raging around low level, things like that. Very few restrictions, can go supersonic over land, whereas we couldn't places. But the high desert ended up growing on me over the years to the point where I love it and I'd live there now in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I like it too.
Yeah.
So you end up getting your first squadron, which was?
Yeah. So out of selection there, I ended up getting selected.
How did the CQ action go there?
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's go to that.
Let's check it out. So here's something interesting. Really quick, small world stuff. So let's back up to when I was an enlisted guy. All right. I'm in nuke power prototype training, which is where you learn how to start up and shut down the reactor, maintain its systems and things like that, right? And so that's one of your last things you do before becoming a qualified, quote, nuke in the Navy. And so the nuke community compared to the aviation community is pretty uptight.
That's an understatement of the century.
Thing I've heard in years.
This end to this end. I mean, it's
big time. It's totally. So just complete diametrically opposed communities in terms of mindset and personalities and everything. So,
especially the fighter community. I mean,
big time. Couldn't be more diametrically opposed. So here I am. I'm about to finish this up. I'm doing all my civilian flying, right? So I know aviation. I know it's what I want to do, but I'm not yet accepted. Well, in stroll these up among this sea of totally uptight dudes, stroll these two guys that could have been gods to me. They're wearing these green flight jackets. And little did I know, I had no idea what it was for anybody, but these are two post-command commanders on their way to the nuke program that are going to command aircraft carriers.
Oh, yeah.
One of them was Captain Sprague, right? And another one was Captain Mark Gemmel, right? Mark Gemmel would end up being the CO of the Eisenhower when I cruised on it a few years later. Wow. And Captain Sprague ended up being the CO of the George Washington. So when I CQ'd in the Tomcat for my very first time, he was the guy that I met when I was an enlisted nuke going through that also further whet my appetite for naval aviation, right? And I forget what he flew. I don't think he was Tomcats. He may have been an A7 guy, A6 or an A7 guy. Not remembering, but nonetheless, when I CQ'd, I knew he was the CO of the ship. I went up and met him. By the way, Chili was my Leakster. Chili Culligan was my CO, was my roommate during that Tomcat CQ in 92 or 93 there.
Wow.
So all small.
Do I recall correctly, they do for the when they go get selected for carrier, they do go to nuke power school before they go to their D draft, right?
Correct.
Because they want to make sure they can make it through nuke power school before they go do their
that. Yes. Yeah. Correct. They do the you get selected, you go to nuke power school, do that whole 2 years of schooling stuff, and then you go do your deep draft, and then you go to your if you're selected, you go to command and carrier.
Which is why you would have had enough time to basically catch up to him back at the GW,
right?
After flight school and the RAG and all that.
Exactly. So
interesting.
I'm laughing because I'm imagining that your experience in nuke power school was different than theirs.
It was. Those guys, they got the, not to say it was a shoo-in they were going to pass, but it was tough for them.
Probably had a little gouge though.
Yeah, exactly. And we didn't have any gouge.
They're a little more motivated to let them pass, right? A little more.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the nuke power school that you went through was your first kind of trial by fire in the Navy, seeing how unforgiving some of these courses can be, because there's a lot of folks that don't make it through nuke power school, just like there's a lot of people that don't make it through flight school or AOCS or, it's unfortunate, but, you see a lot of folks not make it through these things, and it's tough. I mean, they don't make it easy. especially in those days,
For a
'cause
reason.
they
I
hired
mean-
a lot of people.
Yeah.
And off the street, guys like us, they didn't care if you made it through or not. You
Mm.
had to do it yourself.
Yeah, Nuke Power School was there was not a single multiple choice question anywhere in the curriculum. Most of the time, you were handed a test for Nuke Power School, and whether it was physics, radiology, heat transfer and fluid flow, anything, plant systems, and you were handed a packet, mostly blank. It maybe had a question on it, but the rest were blank sheets to do all your calculations, and it was show all work. And a lot of
Wow.
times you'd get stuff wrong, but luckily we called them the partial credit gods. You would get partial credit for a 3-page long answer that you screwed up somewhere,
Right.
first part right.
Wow.
It was tough.
Well, at least for NavCat, I mean, they probably had some inkling, being a nuke, that you could handle the academics. So certainly you had the smarts to make it through. Is the stick and the monkey skill stuff that you needed to know about, right? So yeah, interesting.
Hey,
The
Tom,
reason
what was it
I
like-
asked.
I'm sorry.
about
Go
this-
ahead.
Oh, please go ahead, Ray.
No, I'm just more curious on, being an enlisted guy myself and that transition. And obviously you said you grew up at your dad's garage. You had to be a pretty smart fellow to get through this for sure. I probably wasn't, but I was with a little mentorship. And I'm wondering, when you went through nuke school, was there a mentor? And also the same question, when you started flying for the Navy and going through that school, was there mentors there to help you along?
Well, okay, you being prior enlisted Navy, you know all about crusty Navy chiefs, senior
Yeah.
chiefs, and chiefs, right?
Yeah.
So here I was in Nuke Power School. I'm already, well into my civilian flying, loving flying, knowing I'm wanting to go in the naval aviation route. And who's my class advisor in Nuke Power School down in Orlando, Florida at the time? It's a crusty old Navy senior chief submariner, right? So he's the guy I got to first convince to endorse me for a program. I told you about my multiple attempts to try
Sure.
to get in, right? And so as I'm talking to him, Senior Chief Forsyth, I still remember his name. Hey, Senior, I'm looking to get into this, pilot program. He goes, pilot? Why do you want to be a pilot? Aviators are crazy. Why would anybody?
He's not wrong.
Yeah,
No.
he's not wrong. And then I say, well, why would anybody want to be cooped up in a submarine? Submariners are crazy. Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, there's a lot more planes on the bottom of the ocean than there are submarines in the sky.
Never heard that one before, huh?
Yeah, so they couldn't
Good
argue
story.
with that logic. But yeah, as far as mentors, I had some mentors as leaders, even in the submarine community, and this is universal. It doesn't matter what
Yeah.
community you were going to go to.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a quick example of a guy. He was the XO of my submarine, the USS Will Rogers. His name was Wayne Gambin, and he's still alive. In fact, I had a communication with him about a year ago. And he was informally kind of known. He was kind of a short, kind of fairly round guy, and great guy, kind of animated, but he did something for me that set that was so, I remember to this day. So I had taken this re-enlistment bonus as a nuke, and I didn't get paid like I was supposed to be paid, and everything was checked back at the time. You didn't have a direct deposit account at this time. This is
Right.
87, 88 timeframe. And we were doing a squadron PT run on the field in Groton, Connecticut. And he just said in question, "Hey Bush, you get your bonus yet?" I was supposed to get a check for a couple of grand, which was more money than God had at the time, right? To this.
Sure.
And so, Bush, did you get your money yet? He's talking to me, no, no, sir. What?
Yeah.
And he gets all pissed off and he go, "Come with me," and I get in his personal pickup truck and he drives me to PSD.
Yes.
And I'm walking out of there with my check on a Friday afternoon,
Wow.
a couple hours later, and
Nice.
I watched him read the riot act to the people, and I'm like, I got heart bubbles coming out of my head, for this guy. So, that example, yeah, going to bat for your people and stuff like that,
Nice.
that left a question on me,
Nice.
I think it's universal.
Cool, thank
I saw
you.
a lot of that throughout my career, and from different people, you know, and
Yeah.
I tried to pay that back when I could.
Mhm.
Amen. Amen.
Mhm.
Awesome.
So, uh, so where was I? In the
PQ. I
Oh,
was just curious how your class did, if there was any, those first night traps in the F14 are always enough to get your
yeah,
attention.
yeah. So for those listening, you normally do CQ carrier qual for the first time in the training command in the orange and white jets, as we call them, you know, and it's always daytime only. And so the first time you're seeing the boat at night is
Daytime case 1, right?
yeah, case or case 3 at night.
I mean, I'm
First
sorry.
time,
Your daytime flight school CQ is always case 1, right?
correct. Yeah, daytime case 1, meaning just go around in a pattern like a day landing pattern. So here you are now, going to the boat for the first time in your fleet jet, and you're at the rag, and this is it, you know, and you're solo, or in this case with an instructor Rio, and you're lining up behind the boat at night, and it's any naval aviator would tell you the first time at the boat at night, pilot or Rio, because, and I don't see how you guys did it, Siphon, because man,
My first night approach was I didn't a Tomcat, obviously, and it was in the middle of an exercise, and it was a high pressure moment. I was like, this can't be how it normally is. Oh, but yeah, it is. Anyway, you're saying.
yeah, so the Tomcat was not the easiest airplane to land at the boat. You know, later on, and a few years later, they would come out with what's called DFCS, Digital Flight Control System, that really helped out a lot, from what I understand. But I never flew that when they had it. I don't think you did either, Leakster, did you?
No, I sure didn't.
Yeah, so you know, you had some neat tools to use. In the Tomcat DLC, it was a little thumb wheel where you'd actually roll this wheel, and it would deploy the spoilers and give you kind of some instant rate of descent or instant climb if you wanted one. But I was never that good to use that effectively. You know, you still had some Tomcat ball flyers, as we would say, that were just on rails, as we would say. You wouldn't see the airplane move. They're coming down this 3-degree glide slope or 3.5-degree glide slope, and they're perfect. You don't see anything going on with the airplane. I was, with the exception of one time throughout my career, I was never a threat to a top 10 patch.
That's it.
Come on, surely you got some greens.
Yeah, I certainly did, but I was an average ball flyer at best, and so Leakster, you were an LSO, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
What
Leakster
about-
was the guy that stood on the back of the ship and kept guys like me from hitting it, and we had a landing competition basically throughout the air wing. You want to keep it competitive. To keep something as dangerous as what landing on the boat was, especially at night, you got to keep it competitive. So we had a board in the ready room where all the pilots' grades from the CO on down to the most junior guy were kept. And so if you threw trash
Publicly.
out there, it was up for all to see, you know. And that kind of competitiveness is what helped make this dangerous thing safe.
Which is always great fodder for Rios, because we didn't have anything similar, so we could just throw stones. And it didn't matter.
We kept a secret list, Siphon. We just didn't tell about it. But trust me, the pilots all knew.
Yeah.
Hey, Leakster, I'm curious, in RAG CQ, what are average grades for RAG CQ?
I know
what a line period looks like.
Yeah,
but
the line periods get better as you go on, but it's usually like a 4.0 scale, right? You can get higher, but so the RAG typically, I want to say to pass, you had to have something like a 2.5 or something like that, which is pretty bad. But I think typically at the RAG we saw about on average guys would get 3.0, and the top hook guy would have like a 3.16 or some 3.2 somewhere in there
out of CQ.
So, yeah. Again, the day stuff was always fun, even when you were learning. But the night RAG, when you get that first night landing, that first night cat shot too, that's really intimidating as well. So
I love love those.
And I
I,
wouldn't even say, I would go so far as to say that like the first 50, to be honest with you, even it's never fun to land on the ship at night. It's always very, very serious business. But I never felt comfortable going off the cat at night unless there was a full moon. If it's just a black hole out there and you're as heavy as you're going to be the whole night, the whole flight, if something goes sideways during the cat shot, you're going to have your hands full. It's going to be unpleasant because you're going to have to salvage the airplane, get it away from the ground, figure out what you can get to work, and then maybe come back and have to land a crippled airplane back on the ship. So there's a lot of work ahead of you if something goes wrong on the cat shot.
Hey guys, what was the flight simulators back then like? Were they? I'm sure they weren't as dynamic as you see some of them today.
Yeah, we had a nice simulator that they had a Rio, and they had a backseat sim and they had a front seat sim, and then we had some domes that we used for dogfight simulation. But the front seat simulator on the F14 was more like a systems trainer, to be honest with you. It taught you how to start the engine, and you could shoot approaches and do things like that, but it had minimal motion, and even the visual wasn't all that great. So you would do night carrier landing kind of practice in that thing, but you were really just familiarizing yourself with sitting in that cockpit and getting comfortable where all the switches and buttons are and how it felt to reach when you just stick your hand out and you know where the throttle is or where the refueling probe is or the nose wheel steering or the hydraulics or whatever. It was really helped you familiarize yourself with the systems and how to turn stuff on and off. But frankly, I didn't find it all that great of a simulator. How about you, Jeter?
Yeah, I mean, to me at the time, of course, it was the bestest, greatest, most whiz bang, but of course it was much less than what I'd become familiar with in years hence. But yeah, the dome one was particularly interesting. It was, you remember what they looked like, Leekster? You literally walked, it looked like a mini Epcot center ball, right?
Yeah. Inside
the building. And it was this 360-degree dome, and you'd walk inside it, you'd walk out on a platform
gantry
in the cockpit, and then the platform would go up. So now you're just like this cockpit suspended in the middle of this ball.
It was awesome. It was like science fiction. To me, it was the coolest thing ever. I could have spent hours in those things. I love those trainers for dogfighting. They were cool. But the simulation you cannot simulate the violence of a catapult shot.
Right.
And, there's no, DCS, I play around with and I have the whole setup and have my kid flying the Tomcat, and all the switches work, and it's great. It's an amazing simulation, but you cannot simulate the violence of a catapult shot. It is just something that you have to experience, and trying to keep your brain working while you're getting smashed up against a seat. Imagine that you're doing that and you have an engine failure or a fire or a compressor stall or whatever, and that's like your worst nightmare if it's a big black hole out in front of the ship on a dark night. But that's what we got to play with in the sim is that, hey, you got an engine fire and you get to shut down the engine and hit the fire extinguisher and stuff that you couldn't possibly do in a real airplane. So it was useful in that regard.
Ray, I'll tell you that later in the jets, well, the last simulators we had, the D simulators, we actually did do CQ practice we only had domes. Actually, we had 2 domes for the D community, and one was always offline because they were doing some kind of a hosting upgrade the entire time I was in the community. So I don't know, always offline. So we had one.
Right.
And that one, we actually did, as you said, you don't get the G-force of the catapult. We actually did pretty decent simulators and all the EPs coming off of that. But then the CQ stuff we actually did in the dome as well. And it wasn't bad. I could land it. It was enough. It was enough of a lag that I didn't really feel like I was comfortable with it, but I could land it as a Rio. And so
I was laughing because I remember sitting in that simulator, and they had these old retired guys that were your simulator instructor, and some fat old guy. He's probably like 10 years younger than I am now, but at the time he seemed like a fat old guy standing up there, by the simulator control panel, and he's like, look up at me, and he goes, you're gonna see a guy do this now. put your, you'd have to kneel the simulator,
Yeah.
and he's giving you all the signals, and you're looking at this guy. Oh man, it cracks me up. It just had that memory pop into my brain. I hadn't thought about that for years. Hilarious.
I still remember those sand signals as a plane captain. I don't know why, but I think about them often. It's weird.
They're ingrained, right?
Yeah.
Jeter,
So
I was
you go
thinking.
through so now you
hold
CQ
on.
and
Oh, go ahead.
well, I just move along here and get to the good stuff here.
Yeah.
You CQ, and it's amazing that feeling. And how did you find out where you were going, and what did that look like?
Yeah, so I found out I was going to VF-84, which, of course, any student going through, you're starting to map out the squadrons, who's where in the deployment cycles, and am I going to be going away or joining somebody on cruise, or in my case, which squadron's got the good reps or the coolest insignia. And well, I kind of won that award, if you will, by getting selected to go to VF-84. So with the Skull and Crossbones, which
Classic.
yeah, you kind of can't beat the cool factor in the Jolly Rogers,
Well, all the models have the Jolly Rogers on them, right? So
yeah. So and I just happened to be joining them a month or so after they got back from deployment on the Teddy Roosevelt in '93. So Commander Brad Getch was the XO Stalker Getch, and Boomer Stufflebeam was the skipper at the time when I joined him, and then he rolled out a couple of months after I joined him. Both great guys, and then Traps Cloyd, Rio, who we called the Human Tax Pod, came in after that.
Wow.
The question will come up, so what was it like to fly in the Tomcat, and it goes kind of to the Top Gun, the movie Top Gun slogan of "It's not the box, but the man in the box," and the men or air crew, if you will, in the box. And with an airplane that was working full up, good to go, all the systems working, and two good synchronized crews, you can do some really good work in that airplane. And so it was with a guy like Traps, especially as a Rio that just had, as we said, global SA, and knew how to convey it to you without overloading you. The saying the right thing at the right time, to put the picture in your head of what the tactical environment was out there. So Traps would end up becoming the CO of the Ike when I crewed during my command tour in later years in a Hornet squadron. But just a great guy, and he retired as a flag.
Nice.
But,
Boomer Stufflebeam had a reputation as being a great guy too, and he was one of those 6'3" blonde, he looked like the Hollywood Tomcat guy walking in the O Club, and especially with a Jolly Rogers patch and all that. Yep. So, but yeah, interesting that you went to work for him right off the bat.
Yeah, if you remember, he was I want to say it was during the early part of OIF. He was the spokesman
in the White House,
naval attaché at the time.
Oh,
right, and speaking out about the military situation. But yeah, he was on TV quite a bit.
I've forgotten about that. Did you know you didn't happen to have come across his son while you were there, right? Did you?
Oh yeah,
because I flew with his son actually.
Yeah, really? Yeah, I met him a couple times. Stuff, you mean? I believe.
Yeah.
Stuff, yeah. So I knew of him. I met him a few times, but I didn't know him.
Gotcha.
So
funny.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about his dad being so prominent. Yeah. Wow.
Yep. So yeah, I went to VF-84 for a year, and I will say that it was, we remember back to the early '90s what was happening along with that peace dividend. The same reason I got the letter in the mail after I got winged of, hey, we're looking for volunteers to leave. That same thing was going on with squadrons, if you recall. Remember, VF-74 went away, VF-84 went away. The squadron I was in got set up to decom. Who else? The Starfighters, VF-33 went away. There were some more on the East Coast, and obviously an equal number of West Coast squadrons going away in the early '90s. So
they closed the West Coast RAG.
Yeah.
Consolidated on the East Coast. They stood up SWAT's land, but they didn't fund it very well.
Yeah.
there was a lot of craziness going on. The RAG was overstaffed. They closed all the VC squadrons, like Philippines, Puerto Rico, places like
There used
that.
to be a
All
squadron in
those.
the Philippines.
Yeah, the VC. I don't know.
Oh,
They were the guys who flew the A4s, you know, and did
wow.
support work. And they, if you were a fighter guy, you know, and you were rolling out of your fleet squadron,
Mhm.
you know, everybody kind of wanted to go to the RAG, I guess, was kind of, but a lot of guys wanted to go to maybe VX5 or they wanted to go to an adversary squadron, or they wanted to go to test pilot school.
Mhm.
But you know, almost nobody in the F-14 would go to the training command as an instructor. You went to the VC squadron. If that was like your worst case scenario, you're going to go to the Philippines and fly A4s, or go to down to Puerto Rico, or you know, and then they got rid of all that stuff, and they closed the West Coast RAG, and then they closed all these squadrons, and it was not a good time at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough. Yeah.
What year was that?
This was
About?
93 into 94. So I
Mm.
joined F-84 in 93, found out we were going to decommission or disestablish, better term, about 6 months into it. And then
Sure.
so they were starting to farm people. They stopped taking new people in and then started farming people out, you know, the air crew and enlisted folks for that matter. Once they found out they were going to disestablish. So a friend of mine named Carl Belchek, Biff, he was a VF-32 pilot, a Rio to pilot transition, and he got killed
When
in
they did that.
he got killed in the midair in VF-32 during workups. I want to say it was September of 94. And
Oh, wow.
we were about to leave on cruise the next month in October. So I went over there to replace Biff, and then left on cruise 2 weeks later with VF-82, the Swordsmen. You know, so cruised with them, did about a year and a half, close to 2 years with them, and then transitioned to the Hornet after that. But worked for, while I was waiting to do the Hornet transition in 96, I was working for Snodgrass at the at Fighter at the time. And this is a time when the Tomcat was, you know, Snort was basically forcing new life into the platform by very unconventional means. You know, anybody that knows the acquisition world and how programs and things like that happen, a very long convoluted chain of money, approvals and testing and everything else. And Snort basically said, hey, here's a lantern pod, it works on the F-16, let's bolt it onto the Tomcat, make it work. And he did that, you know, so he was one of the prime drivers behind that whole effort, and that just breathed new life into the Tomcat right as
Absolutely.
I was, you know, so good on him for that.
Yeah.
So when you went to 32, they were still flying, obviously they're flying A's. They ended up flying B's later. Was that shortly after you were with them?
Unfortunately, I left before that time. So I have about 10 hours in the B, maybe 15, and a good chunk of those hours are when they had afterburner restrictions on. So the F-14B and D, when they first came out, they had a afterburner liner burn through issue. In other words, so you got this massive hot flame going back there that was so intense in certain spots that it would burn through the liner. And what was running right above the liner? Nice little thin aluminum flight control rods.
Oh, flight control, okay.
Yeah, flight control rods. So literally burned through the rods. In fact, while I was going through the RAG, and this is probably the mishap that resulted in the burner restrictions for the Bs and Ds. A guy named Fred Dillingham as the instructor Rio, and an A6 transition student who was out on his FAM1 flight. So once again, so he was an A6 pilot by trade. He was an LSO. He was doing LSO transition training. And what's the first thing they do on their first flight? Go supersonic. So they're out and going supersonic and in full burner in a B. The liner burns through, cuts through the control rod, and a stab goes hard over into the wind, doing Mach 1 point whatever, and it just really tore the whole back end of the airplane off. You know, I guarantee you, they never felt it.
He was at fighter wing when that mishap happened. I want to say, I don't know why he was flying. He was flying with the RAG, obviously. That he ended up flying with that A6 guy, and And that kind of shocked all of us. It was a really shocking accident, you know, because they were just cooking along supersonic and the airplane literally just came apart. And
Wow.
I don't know how they figured it out, but they said there was some ungodly amount of negative G. It caused a pitch over and they went out. I mean, I want to say it was like 60 negative G's or some, the front end of the airplane went. And I have no idea how they figured out what went wrong with that airplane, because it was just a bunch of pieces out. It's about 80 miles offshore of Virginia. So I was amazed that they figured it out. But later, we had a couple more F-14s blow up, and then they said, okay, no more afterburner until we get this thing sorted out. The engine itself was designed for the F-16, and they had to put in a 1 foot extension to the afterburner, and that was just enough that it caused some sort of Mach diamond shockwave inside there that was causing a hot spot, from what I understand.
Wow.
Did they end up detuning the burner, or did they figure it out acoustically?
No, I think they came up with some better material, or I don't know how they changed the airflow in there or whatever, but yeah. And, you know, we were flying the airplanes around for probably I don't know. What do you think, Jeet? Was it like a year and a half?
Over a year, yeah, with a burner
It was like
restriction.
18 months.
Mm.
And you could just go basic engine, no blower.
Yeah.
Really?
So,
Yeah.
yes. So
What
then
about
you're
how-
King Kong and an A. Yeah, I'll go fight that B guy. But, you know, guys were cheating, you know, guys were using burner anyway, so.
Wow, gotcha. So, and then when you finished your time in the Tomcat, as you mentioned, you kind of alluded to, you took the bait.
Well, tell us about your combat time, your deployment time.
Yeah,
so
there had to be some interesting stuff.
Real quick, I'll tell you a couple of missile shoot stories. I got to shoot 3 Sidewinders off a Tomcat, all hits. Attempted a Sparrow. The Sparrow didn't come off. It was the missile's fault, not the airplane's. And so the AIM-7 radar guided missile, for folks listening, you know, you got to realize that a lot of times when we do a live missile shoot, that missile's been sitting on the shelf for 5, 10, 15 plus years, you know, and so yeah, they're supposed to be maintained, but they're old.
That's the end of its life, basically, right? So
yeah, exactly, getting rid of old inventory, you know. And so the Sparrow didn't come off, but the most impressive one, I think that's a neat story to tell folks, is the Phoenix missile shoot that I did. And, you know, classic Tomcat Phoenix missile shoot where you get a BQM, the drone target out there in front of you, you know, some number of miles away. And, you know, I think we had 4 or 5 Tomcats line abreast, and we're going to cut loose our Phoenixes at a certain range. And it was also a supersonic shot. So if you remember, when it came time for all the missile shoots, you get more points, you know, towards your Battle E award and all this stuff when you know, do the missile shots under more difficult parameters, right? More challenging parameters. So in this case, it's a supersonic missile shot. And so we're already going supersonic. And here's the thing about the Phoenix. So it's 1,000 pounds. The thing weighs 1,000 pounds, right? We called it the crazed kamikaze wingman. And my Phoenix happens to be on a wing station. So rather than on the belly, it's out on a wing station. So you got that 1,000 pounds sitting on that, in this case, a left wing station. And the missile had what's called a 3-second LTE, 3-second launch to eject. So from the time you squeeze the trigger until it was actually coming off, it was 3 seconds. And you had to squeeze and hold the trigger for that long. And so 3 seconds seems like forever when you're in a high stress evolution, like a missile shoot. You've never actually done this live before, right? And, you know, a lot of stuff on the line here. So here's the biggest thing about the Phoenix, right? You're thinking that for the missile this large, in my head, I had established the fact that this thing's going to be like a Saturn V sitting on the launch pad, and that when I hit the trigger, I was going to see this smoke billowing up, and, you know, it was going to build up, and then it was going to slowly out accelerate the airplane, you know. No, you know, I just remember saying, Fox 3, it was like slow motion, and then my head going over to look like, where is this thing? And then I see it just, you know, I feel a little, you know, the wing drop as the 1,000 pounds falls away, and then this thing takes off like a freaking bottle rocket. You know, I mean, it was
Wow.
that fast.
Awesome.
So it was so impressive to see it do its what's called the MBAM maneuver, the main beam avoidance maneuver, where the missile maneuvered to get out of the beam of the host radar. So that's why it did this big up and over kind of arcing profile, and to maximize its range. But just an impressive overall thing, you know, to see actually happen. And to realize that at best, and it's been tested, you know, to be able to shoot up to 6 of those things, you know, that are going to go active, and you can launch and leave if you want to. So that was a capability the airplane had, and for the range that missile had, you know, it was just second to none for quite a while.
Pretty cool to see how high it goes too, man.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, you're like
There
watching
you
that
go.
smoke trail go up into outer space
Yep.
or wherever it goes. You're like,
Yep.
wow, that is
Wow.
cool.
Did all
Yep.
5 go?
Yep, sure did.
Nice.
Yep. And then of course, when the motor
Nice.
burns out, you don't see any smoke anymore. And
Yeah.
it's still going.
And that's when you know the bad guys are like, where is it?
Exactly.
It's coming down, man.
That'd be a
There's
bad
a
thing.
whole lot of badness coming out of space at you right now. It's lightning bolts from Thor.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember in the fighter fling video from a few years later, someone was filming a 4-shot, and they're like, you know, Fox 3 off of the same jet, and they're like, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, because they're like $1 million. So
Probably a lot more than that now.
Yeah, right. They probably
Yeah, I
will.
think the C's that I shot were well over. They were pushing over 2 million even back in those days. The
Oh,
old
were they?
A's,
Wow.
the original 54 A's that we shot, they were just 1 million. They were nearly disposable.
Right.
Crazy.
So you went over to Iraq, or you went to Bosnia?
Yeah,
Or you went to
so-
Kosovo?
Yeah, on that 94-95 cruise, went over to First Southern Watch at the time. So, you know, the first Gulf War had obviously ended. And so here we are 3-4 years later, and we're defending the no-fly zone over Iraq. So we'd fly up, we'd be in the Gulf, fly up about 300-400 miles to get into country, and then basically patrol. I think it was the 32nd parallel. Does that sound familiar? I forget the actual geographic, you know, lat long coordinate, but it was, I think, anything south of the 32nd parallel, Saddam wasn't allowed to go or send any of his aircraft. And so, because
OSW, right?
OSW, Operation Southern
Yeah.
Watch. So
Okay.
that was essentially the, you know, of course, the enforcement of the no-fly zone over Iraq in the south. And then, of course, Operation Northern Watch on the opposite side typically got serviced by Air Force guys out of, I want to say, Incirlik, Turkey.
That sounds about right.
Yeah,
That
but
sounds
here
about
we
right.
were doing the Southern Watch out of you know, off the carriers, and so essentially it was you know, patrolling the southern part of Iraq. You'd get tinkled every once in a while by SAM systems. You'd get a little tingle, but they knew that, you know, they were just trying to push our buttons. And then they'd run MiG-25 and stuff like that at high speed towards the border, and, you know, get us to kind of react to that, and they'd turn around and run before you know, before they met our rules of engagement. So never had to do any shooting over there, if you will, but other than that, just basically touring around the southern.
And you
Iraq.
guys, the air wing, did they lose any airplanes during that time period during that deployment?
We did not on deployment, actually. So on the way back, we then went into the Adriatic, and we did Operation Deny Flight over Bosnia. That was mostly at the time the previous guys to us, the previous carrier and air wing to us, had been doing a lot of bomb dropping. But when we were there, it was kind of wintertime in early 95, and it was overcast most of the time. So, you know, we were doing a lot of TARPS missions when we could, because of the weather.
So you're seeing a lot of clouds and tarps.
Yeah, exactly. So when we could, and you got to remember too, this is pre-GPS days. So GPS was a brand new thing coming out. So the precision over navigation, trying to find little artillery pieces buried down in the woods and take pictures of them, you know. So we would, you know, get our best coordinates on those things from our intel. And we actually had handheld GPSs that we used in the cockpit to try and get us in close to, to get these pictures when the weather allowed it.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, but you guys were, I guess, far from mensurating coordinates at that point. So yeah, it's actually kind of a hope it works out. If you see it, great. If you don't, not surprising, right?
It worked out pretty good. I mean, we did the same in my air wing, and we got some good pictures most of the time. It was shocking to me. You were using this little handheld GPS, and you would stick it in the canopy jettison handle there or something, or somehow mount it up on the instrument panel, and you'd put some coordinates in it before you left, and then you'd fly over and take some pictures, and it was amazing how they would find stuff in those tarps. The worst thing about tarps was over there was that they were shooting down an airplane about once every 6 months to a year over there, and as a tarps guy, you were down in the weeds. We were down at 5,000. We were basically right in the heart of their SAM envelopes. So and they would shoot at you with AAA and stuff as much as they could. You wouldn't even know it because in the daytime you can't really see it, but at night you'd be like, hey man, they're shooting a lot of stuff down there. Yeah. So yeah, you start being a little bit more careful in the daytime once you realize how much lead was flying around, because you get kind of cavalier about flying around down low until you get that wake up call. Luckily nobody got hurt in our air wing anyways, but
so that deployment was split roughly half and half between OSW and night flight?
Pretty much, yep.
Gotcha.
So the squadron, you mentioned the squadron. Did you guys lose an airplane or two during your tour there? Or
to go back to VF-84, we lost 2 airplanes almost exactly a year apart, and believe it or not, with the same pilot and Rio combination. It was one of those lightning can't strike twice, except when it does.
They never flew together again.
Oh yeah, they didn't. But yeah, and I happened to be the schedules writer at the time, and just happened to schedule these 2 guys, pilot and Rio, together for this particular sortie, and they go out and do it. And I still have a black and white newspaper clip. In fact, the first airplane they had to shell out of, they ejected, and they both got out safely, no injuries to either of them, but the airplane was lost, and it went down in the Pamlico Sound, if you remember where that was, just kind of down, so
North Carolina.
Yeah, they had a
kind of near Dare.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so the airplane, when it went in, I literally have the picture of the tail sticking up the
That's
water.
a classic photo, man.
Yeah,
I'm sure you can find that on Google search pretty
Hey,
easily.
Lorenzo, you totally need to put that in there when we post this.
Copy that.
It was a oil seal in the engine or something like that, burned out, and the engine came apart, and they slung blades into fuel cell, caused a fire, something. That's my shady recollection of what it was.
So it fell apart.
Yeah, the engine came apart and shed blades into like a fuel cell or something, started a fire. And
so there was an incident around in the early 90s where guys had an engine fire and they pulled the fire handle, but it was connected to the wrong engine, or the light was connected to, they were cross wired, and they ended up shutting down the good motor. And but do you remember that one?
Yeah, it vaguely sounds familiar, but that wasn't the case in this one.
Yeah. So then these guys go flying a year later, and then
so a year later, they had almost the exact same scenario where they have to shell out of an airplane because of a fire.
Wow.
And it was a guy named Scuzz Douse and Kevin Martin Duker. Duker would go on to become a Air Force exchange pilot. In fact, Siphon, were you on the last episode where Mongo Lloyd spoke?
Mm-hmm.
Mongo Lloyd and Duker Martin were both in the same squadron with me in VF-84, both went to the Air Force, and Duker is the guy, his buddy and my buddy, that shelled out twice.
I gotcha. Okay, nice. So he's got 2 Martin Baker ties.
Yep. And I actually sent him off for his private pilot license, believe it or not. He got his private pilot license through me on the side, just wanting to learn to fly. So
nice.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Actually, it is interesting, just a little side note, the number of Rios I know who did get their private license it's not, I wouldn't exactly call it pilot envy, but I mean, there is something to be said for being in control of the aircraft. I mean, who likes
Yeah.
riding in the right seat of a car all the time?
Yep.
You
Yeah.
know, so it's
Guy VF-32 with me, Santa Klaus, was his last name. Santa, great guy.
Santa Claus.
Actually, Noel was,
Santa was at 102 with me. I did 2
Santa
deployments.
was? Wait,
Oh yeah.
thinking the same
Yeah.
Santa? Was Noel his last name, or I'm just drawing a blank on his last name? Anyway,
maybe
he's a
it's
Southwest
different.
captain now. He's
Yeah.
a South. So,
Okay.
another guy who was able to, parlay his Navy experience and then go get his pilot tickets out of it. And yeah, I'm not seeing his.
Yeah, we have 2 other friends. Jeter and I have 2 other friends in common that were both NFOs. One guy was a Rio, the other guy was a A6 guy, but they went on to be get all their tickets, and they're both airline captains now.
Captains.
Nice.
Wow. Okay. Had enough time to make it through. Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you're getting ready to leave the 32, and then you got a transition before you had to go for some sort of shore duty then, I guess, huh? Because that's when you're leaving 32, you're thinking, oh, where am I going to go, to the RAG or wherever?
Right. And
then,
so, and this gets into career stuff here, but as you guys know, and the folks listening may not, appreciate as much, not knowing the dynamics of the Navy, how do you advance in this system, right? And by that, I mean, you're very handicapped when you have broken service in a squadron. In other words, you typically build yourself up in a squadron. So if you're going to go to a squadron, you're going to be there for 3 years. You're going to start out junior, get all your quals. You get to be a known quantity, and then the fitness reports that you get that determine where you're going to go later on are written based on your performance and how much they like you and those kind of things. Well, when you break that up by leaving a squadron, and then you're basically starting out at ground zero in the next squadron, right? You're pretty handicapped by that, right? So so it was going to be for me in VF-32, getting there and only spending a year and a half there. So that was part of the reason too that influenced me to go over to the Hornet community. But it was also the fact that the Tomcat at the time was definitely starting to be towards the end of its life until the Lantern Pod breathed life back into it in the air to ground mission. I resurrected the airplane for another 10 years at that point. Exactly.
Easy. Yeah, honestly, that it looked bad. I mean, I remember I was in college when that was happening. I was finishing my college time. I actually started officer candidate school in '96, and I had a strange career progression as well. In not the same as you, but a similar effect is that I actually got my wings as a lieutenant, and showed up in my first squadron with already some time, significant amount of time in the Navy. So, and then we were the last Tomcat squadron, so we went to Super Hornets, but single seat Super Hornets. So, same kind of thing. Like it just transitions like that. They don't treat some people well. It wasn't enough time for me. So I know what you mean. I'm glad you were able to get into the Hornet community early enough that you were able to make something out of it. That's good.
Right. Yeah. And being an AVCAT ended up being a blessing there because I was junior. Right?
Oh, yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Years from a rank perspective that gave me the ability to do a super JO tour later on, a second JOC tour as a training officer, in the Hornet. And that really reset me.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So did you go to the weapons school in the Hornet? Is that what you did?
I did. So when I went down to Cecil to do the Hornet transition in '96, right after the fighter fling, where I was the MC for Snort at the fighter fling in '96, and this is where they did the big Tomcat Lantern Pod rollout and all that. I go down to Cecil. I do what's called a Cat 2F syllabus. So this was lots of communities. The A7 had just gone away, right? And so they had to transition all those people. S3s were going away. They transitioned a lot of those people, and Tomcats as well. So as the Tomcat squadron shrinking down, a lot of guys going to the Hornets. So they had a Cat 2, meaning your second time through the RAG, but you've already been a fighter guy. So it's called a Cat 2F syllabus. So it just pared down the syllabus that a normal guy with no experience would get. Gave you less flights, because you didn't need as many. And in this case, since I was due for a short tour, things went pretty well for me in the RAG, and they kept me there as an instructor. And they sent me to Top Gun from the RAG. This is right as the SFWT Top Gun RAG program, training officer program was just kind of standing up at the time. So it had been around a year or two, and so I became the RAG training officer.
Oh,
Wow.
So
so you went through your Cat 2, what do you call it? F,
Cat 2F
right?
syllabus.
Yeah, they called it T when I went through, but yeah, whatever. Cat 2F, then Top Gun, and then came back to the RAG as the training officer.
Right.
That's a good
Holy
deal.
cow. So you're
That's a good
still
deal.
trying to figure out how to fly this freaking airplane.
Was.
And you're a lieutenant, obviously, right? You weren't even an 04 yet.
Yeah, no, totally. I just probably put on lieutenant, a year prior.
Holy
Right.
cow.
Yeah, it was
Awesome.
fantastic opportunity, and I
It's
had
hilarious.
and walk, have an open door in front of you, walk through it.
Yeah, right. Totally.
Wow.
Do you have
Huge.
any window into how that happened?
A little bit, and part of it was timing as well. They were the inbound guy, so normally the guy who comes from a fleet squadron, right? He's getting done with his 3-year fleet tour. He's on his way to the RAG to be an instructor. Well, at the time, what they were doing is they were taking a guy on his way to the RAG, sending him through Top Gun en route, right? It was a 10-week course at the time, because they incorporated all the strike fighter stuff into it. And then you show up at the RAG and be the training officer there. Well, the guy that was inbound to fill that role didn't make it through Top Gun. So
So you're a hot fill, basically.
a hot fill. Yeah. And my daughter was 4 weeks old, and I had just completed
Good timing.
They liked me, and hey.
So other than cooler patches on your jacket, what did you bring to the Hornet community coming from the F14? Is there anything?
Totally cooler patches.
Yeah. A little more in the in the steeped and fighter stuff, obviously. The Hornet community will tell you, they're jack of all trades, master of none, right? And that is tough to keep a mastery of all the air to ground and all the air to air stuff. You can generally be pretty darn good at most of it, but like, for example, you're not going to be as good as the pure blood F-15C pure air to air Eagle guys, which those guys are amazing, right? That's all they do is air to air.
Right.
But even then they were Sparrow only, right? And of course the Hornets were Sparrow only, so active stuff they had no idea about. They didn't know what F-pole was. I mean, like, so. Yeah,
we had AMRAAM by 98, and so this was 96. Yeah, well, yeah, 96, 97. AMRAAM was pretty new, to the Hornet.
Okay.
But,
okay.
So, yeah.
I was thinking AMRAAM was more of like a 99-ish thing, but I guess it was before that, huh?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was
so you go to the gun school. You go out there in this airplane that you have like minimal time in, and now you're like mixing it up and doing everything, right? You're doing low levels, ingress, dropping bombs, and then you got to fight your way out. And
asked for the name of that truck driver school several times.
Yeah, you gotta learn how to talk on the radio and navigate and stuff. Figure out where the tanker is, all that on your own, right?
Yeah, it was tough, and it was a fire hose. For me, I definitely had to work harder than your average bear probably.
Sure.
Give no time, to get through this course.
So so then as far as like flying the airplanes, and landing on the ship and all that, I mean, you find certainly I would imagine the Hornet was easier to fly when it came to those kind of things.
Overall easier, yeah. I mean, it's just it's the generation of technology. It's nothing to badmouth either plane, but it's just
right.
The Hornet was made to be easy to fly. It basically just wants to maintain 1G. You let the stick go, and whatever attitude you're in, it stays there. Unless you're in a big nose low, it just wants to do 1G. So it'd even level off by itself without autopilot if you left it alone.
Wow. That's what I have, just a couple hours in it. Lucky enough that I got to fly it a couple times, and I thought it was extremely well designed from a from a pilot standpoint, I mean, that's what you want as a fighter pilot, right? You got to run radars and weapon systems and fly formation and all that, and having an airplane that wants to fly itself when you let go of the controls, so that you can do other things is helps you open up your aperture in a combat environment. You don't want to be task loaded trying to fly formation in the dark with somebody and trying to run a radar at the same time. It's not easy to do.
I bet.
So did you, curiosity, did you miss having someone else in your cockpit with you?
Many times, yeah. I mean, it's you know, I told everybody this, you know, the generations of technology were very different between the two airplanes, obviously, and it's just natural order of things, right? I mean, the F14 was generations leaps and bounds ahead of the F4. The F4 was way ahead of the F100 and other airplanes like that. And that's natural order of things. I always tell people that I felt overall tactically more effective in the Hornet, but I had a lot more fun in the Tomcat squadron, you know, because it was purely a function of, you basically had the same number of ground jobs to do. You still had troops to take care of and write evals and do awards and, you know, write the flight schedule and do planning and all those kind of things. But you had half the people to do it with in a single seat Hornet squadron than you did in a Tomcat squadron. So as a result, you know, the camaraderie was a lot better in the Tomcat squadron overall. The swagger, I think, was, you know, you had more of that, and it was definitely a fun atmosphere overall to be in a Tomcat squadron. It was quite a fraternity.
Awesome.
So
At the end of
so-
life,
go ahead.
I was going to say,
Sorry.
at the end of the Tomcat life, we had, of course, a lot of squadrons. What was it? Maybe a third of them went to single seat Super Hornets. And I remember lots of those guys, especially guys that were doing the transition in the squadron, like you know, they had at least a year left kind of time frame in the squadron. So they just did in situ transition to the single seat. I remember a lot of them, especially even in our squadrons, the last two squadrons, we were the one that went to the single seat. Those guys were like, man, I mean, the D was a good jet. And of course, the block Super Hornet that they got was a better jet in some ways. Sorry, Lorenzo, that's not what I mean, but you know what I mean. It was an improvement.
Heard that.
It was an improvement in some ways, for sure. But just the lack of a second mind in the cockpit. I remember guys talking about that being a big change. That you know, we had a digital cockpit, we had an all glass cockpit already, and that was all, you know, not touchscreens, but MFDs, and we're used to that, and just the functionality and learning different menus and stuff like that. But just even still stupid little things like, hey, how do you get to that menu? You know, things like that. You can't ask the guy in the back seat, you know, or vice versa.
How about leading a strike? If you're the strike leader and you've got, you know, 20, 25 other airplanes, and you're trying to do that and manage it all from a single seat cockpit, from the check-in to the tactical execution and everything. And it is incredibly difficult, you know. So in this case, I would definitely tip the hat to the two-seat platform for that mission, you know, the role.
Yeah. And we were, even at the time, we were constricted to, I don't know if they've changed it now, but FAC A's were all only two-seat, obviously. So Tomcats and two-seat Super Hornets. So unfortunately, we had some guys in our squadron that were FAC A's that couldn't do FAC A anymore because they were going to single seat. I don't know. They may have changed that now. I don't know. I know the Air Force does some single seat FAC A, but they do it at a different level. A different, I don't know. I don't even know what it is. A different control level. I wasn't a FAC A, so I don't know. But I remember guys talking about that kind of check and balance just isn't there anymore. So yeah. So when you completed your time in the Navy, what was your kind of balance of Tomcat time to Hornet time?
Yeah, so I ended up with like 648 hours in the Tomcat, and 2,400 in the Hornet, 2,445 in the Hornet, something like that. And, you know, as most fighter guys know, that most of your time outside of, you know, actual mission time, when you're doing 6-hour plus missions in the Gulf and whatnot, most of your time in fighters is an hour at a time, plus or minus a little bit, you know. So it's a lot of
That's a lot.
That's a lot of
that was
sorties.
an impressive amount of fighter pilot time. flight time for a fighter guy. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a real flying career. It sounds like you stayed in the cockpit and stayed relevant to your whole career. So what did you do after the RAG then? You went back to the fleet and you did department
Yeah,
head,
so-
or what'd you do?
So whereas I thought Cecil was set up to brack, everything closing down, right? So I show up to
Right.
Cecil in 6 knowing it was going to brack and be closed.
You starting to take this personally about that point, that wherever you go, they close the squadron or the base?
Yeah. Even the old submarine I came off of, that was cut into
Yeah.
razor blades by,
That's
in fact,
what was left of it after you.
yeah. That was cut into razor blades 2 years after I left or so. But,
Wow.
in fact,
Oh, I think your background might not make this possible. We'll see.
here's a piece of my old
Nope.
submarine. I don't know if you could see it.
No. Oh, there we go.
It's just the
Oh, there it
square.
is.
It's a square piece of metal. Is it a
X.
cube?
Yeah, it's a cube. It's 2¼ inches of HY80 steel. That was part of the hull of
Oh,
the,
wow.
How cool.
So stuff is heavy. Anyway, yeah, I went to Cecil knowing it was going to close, and so by '99, as I'm leaving after my 3-year tour, I knew I was due for a super JO tour, so a second JOC tour, and I was expecting to go back to Oceania and do an East Coast squadron there, but guess what? They needed somebody in Japan, and so I didn't necessarily want to go to Japan because a lot of the logistics of Japan, I heard cool things about it, but the logistics of going to Japan. Imagine you're living in the States. Imagine
Oh,
you
your family, yeah.
had 2 big black
we
labs.
did the same a few years later. I know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't bring big dogs over there and stuff. We had 2 big
Nope.
dogs. Had a brand
You
new
only
kid,
bring a few thousand pounds. Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I had woodworking tools, all this stuff, and so you can't bring any of that stuff. And but nonetheless, went over there to the VF-87 Royal Mesas and F-18C Squadron, Lot 13s, and flew those for 2 years and flew off the Kitty Hawk and did all that stuff and acted as a training officer. So great time, great folks, great squadron. Saw a lot of really cool stuff over there in Japan. A lot of neat history,
Totally.
Yeah, we do our landing practices in Iwo Jima on the island of Iwo Jima and got to explore around the island quite a bit, go in the caves and things like that. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, just amazing the things you see over
I'm
there.
so jealous of that. That would be amazing. Wow.
So, and then after that, so this was another advantage of being a NAVCAT, if you will. So coming out of that tour in 2001, so it's June of 2001, I finished up that tour with the Mesas, and I'm still a lieutenant. I still have a little ways to go to another year to make 04. And I thought about rushing the Blues, but to do that, I'd been gone so much. My wife was pregnant with her second kid, and I'd already missed so much time away from my daughter, being out at sea all the time. I thought about going for the Blues, but realized those guys are gone 300 days out of the year. And so had I done the Blues straight out of that, you're going to be gone 300 days a year for 2, maybe 3 years, depending on which, role you do in the team. And then what do you do straight after the Blues? You go to a department head tour. I could see, so I was like, nah, I need a little breather. So what I did is I actually went to War College. I got accepted in the Navy War College pre-department head. So I actually showed up at the Navy War College in Newport as a lieutenant and started the syllabus as a lieutenant, pinned on 04 in, I don't know, about 6 months later. But I finished War College as a brand new 04, and so 9/11 happened 2 weeks into War College. And so of course, first thing I wanted to do is get back in an airplane and go saw the wing off of another airplane or drop some bombs or something. And unfortunately, here I was trapped at the War College.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. They didn't close the War College after you left there.
They did for a week. Yeah, you get on campus for a week. You can't fight in here. It's the War College.
Actually, what they did is they closed OCS and moved it up there too. But that's a different story.
That's true. It's there now.
Right. That's true. It's another one on you, Jeter.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So after war college, went to the Joint Forces Staff College, did the phase 2 thing for the JPME stuff, just because I had time. I had the time.
Man.
And then, do you know Trigger Eberhardt by chance? Rio, he was in the Diamondbacks.
Mm-mm.
Uh,
Trigger?
Yeah,
Hmm.
Trigger Eberhardt. So well, actually, back up. That comes later. So after the war college and staff college job, I did a department head tour with VF-83, the Rampagers out of East Coast, and that's where I did that last cruise on the Kennedy in 2004, before they put her to bed. And in fact, to put a Tomcat spin into this, there is a neat video. You can find it online. So here it is. It's summertime 2004. We're in the Persian Gulf doing ops into Iraq. And you know how the flight deck gets, especially in summertime, and especially on, an old small conventional carrier like the JFK. So the deck is kind of slick and you got limited sea space. So the carrier's running back and forth trying to make wind over the deck for night recoveries. And they have to, in many cases, get all the way to the end of their line, turn around and go the other way. Right. And you got these dhows, these small fishing vessels all around in the Gulf. And so here I am, I had just landed and I'm sitting down in the ready room and they, you're looking at all the different plat cams around there. One of these was looking down from the island. And all of a sudden I hear over the 1MC, the ship speaker system, I hear something like brace for impact or something like that. I think it's a brace for impact. And all of a sudden you feel the boat just do this big list where they stomped on the rudder up there on the engine because we literally hit a dhow. The CO got relieved out of it, but it really wasn't his fault, but it always is, right? We hit one of these dhows at night and a Tomcat goes sliding and it's got DCAG in it. What was DCAG's name? Guadnini was the CAG at the time.
Oh, Guad. Yeah.
His DCAG was, this is CAG 17. Skids Massey. I think Skids Massey was in the Tomcat, goes sliding across the deck because the motion was that violent, right? And here's the funny thing about
his name's Skids. So
yeah, that's funny. The Tomcat wing hits a Hornet, like takes out 1 or 2 Hornets, and the Tomcat, I think they put a Band-Aid on it and flew it in the next go probably, but kind of did some good damage, wiped out a radome and something else on a couple different Hornets, and I was impressed with the whole airplane just flying across the deck when they did that.
Was this
ended up with a lot of
JFK's
traps,
last?
right? Skids.
It was. What's that?
I said Skids. Didn't he get a bunch of traps? Didn't he end up with a high trap count?
Lights Leanhouse, as far as I know, because I made his plaque, has the high trap count. I want to say 1,600 plus.
What did you end up with when you
725?
725. Nice.
Beauty.
And they got rid of bag X's and all that, and where you could just go out and get a bunch of traps. That those kind of went away in the latter years.
It does get harder. The gas got expensiver.
Yeah,
725 is nothing to shake a stick at. I mean, that's a lot of traps. Holy smokes.
Yeah. I wish I could have got 1,000 like some guys, but LSOs typically would get 1,000 because during their off tours or they become CAG LSOs and whatnot.
Right. So you where were we at? You're at department head at
department head. So
83, and then you went to
do that deployment and then come home and so that deployment, by the way, with Tomcats was a VF-103 at the time. So it's prior to them transitioning to the Hornet as well. So funny story about
when they were flying already now the Skull and Crossbones.
Yes. So it was neat to be with them, and I can show you pictures where as Ensign Bush in VF-84, guess who got to keep the bones? So
yes.
So I have a picture of me I could show you. It was me holding the Skull and Crossbones, an actual Skull and Crossbones in the case, and of course other squadrons would always want to steal him. Jack Ernie was his name.
What's his name? Ernie?
Jack.
What?
Jack.
Yes.
So other squadrons would always want to steal them, and there'd always be a rivalry going on. And so during workups,
we had him for about a week or something like that.
Yeah. during that workup cycle for deployment, 103, we had stolen Jack, right? And had him in safekeeping. And we actually, this wasn't me, this was some of the enterprising JOs. In fact, it's Smitty, Leakster, one of the Smitties you and I know, actually put Jack for sale on eBay. And and it came back, and an automated thing came back, an eBay warning of not allowed to put human remains on.
Human remains, no.
And so to get us back, we almost got into fisticuffs at the Fallon Oak Club. Once again, this is during workups. They got us back pretty good. They 103 stole a couple of our rental cars and drove them up to the top of Fairview Peak on the day we were supposed to fly off. Left them there.
Awesome.
Anyway, it's good
Crazy.
fun. Yeah.
Nice.
So anyway, I finished up the squadron tour with VF-83, and then I went to be the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office liaison officer to Joint Forces Command. That's a whole word salad there, but basically NRO, the people who launch and maintain our space systems.
It's all Space Command now.
Satellite stuff, yeah, Space Command
Yeah.
stuff. So that was in the room without a view. I would say it was building NH-95 over at the Norfolk Naval Annex. I worked in there for 2 years and took that job from F14 Rio named Trigger Eberhardt. He was in the
I can't believe he did that. Wow.
Yeah, so I did that for 2 years, and then I'd go out and travel around a lot and educate the fleet on space systems and stuff like that, and got to see some really cool things that you
got to see Bin Laden sitting on in an outhouse probably somewhere out there. Hey, we can get him.
Yeah, suffice it to say, we got some pretty good stuff.
Some good gear.
We pay a lot for it.
Yeah.
So after that, found out I got selected for command in 2007, and then started the command training track, and then did XOCO of VFA 131 Wildcats, and did back-to-back deployments to Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan ops in that job. And once I finished the command tour, very last thing I did was 1 year as the operations officer on the George Washington, which was the base carrier there in the last year.
Little payback time.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of post-command 05 jobs, the air boss, the OPSO, and the navigator, which is usually a helicopter guy on the carrier. So it's a.
But you had 20 by then, right? So you didn't
I had
actually have to.
Yeah.
You could have left anytime you wanted, right?
Well, I had 4 years to the day enlisted, and then the rest of the time officer. So I retired with 25 years and 4 months. And it was just one of those things, I could have stayed in, made 06 with mathematical certainty. It was a matter of spending so much time away from the kids, really, and
I guess what I was getting at is, after what I've seen typically is that when guys roll out of their command tour, they're at like year 18, 19, and the Navy's got them, and then they stick them in some crappy job, they got to go back out to sea, even though they just came. They're okay.
They had me too.
The air boss now, or whatever.
Yeah, they had me to the degree that I took the command bonus.
Oh, okay.
They had that, command bonus program, 15 grand a year. I think it was at the time for me. I think it's much more now, but because they're having a definite problem keeping post command 05s right now.
Yeah,
they need to do these jobs.
Yeah, there's a reason.
Oh, I know.
Because your kids are like teenagers by then, and you haven't been around for their entire lives. So you're like, I'm out. I'm serious. It's a serious problem in the Navy, and I think it's a tragic problem, really, because you're losing some people. You're losing your most experienced, most talented people, and they get to the point where their families just can't take it anymore. And you're like, okay, I got to split. And the Navy owns you after that command tour because they know you need 18 more months to get the 20. So they'll give you some terrible job. And then the guy will leave after that with a really bad taste in his mouth.
That's one of the huge drawbacks of the military personnel system in general, and all branches really. So we grow all of our talent from the ground up. And so, enlisted officer, same thing. You take a super experienced jet engine mechanic who then got into the supervisory role, made chief, senior chief, maybe master chief. Boom, you lose that guy for some reason. You just don't go get another one off the street. You got to go.
No,
So same
no,
thing.
an experienced fleet pilot, if he's lost during in the middle of his fleet tour, you're talking 4 years to replace a guy like that's 4 years you've invested in that person's training. And that's nothing compared to somebody like you're talking about, somebody that has, a senior chief in a SEAL team that's got, 15 years of combat experience. He's a leader within that organization.
Mm.
I mean, you can't replace that kind of corporate knowledge very easily. It just takes time.
Yep.
That's all there is,
Well,
So
Jeter, that's an amazing career. I'll tell you what, I'm humble jealous. It's pretty awesome. Honestly, you had a pretty awesome flying career.
Yeah.
I think it's a testament to American culture. You have a kid who grows up in a middle class family, and is mechanically inclined and likes adventure, and just goes out there and takes the opportunity and finds himself living an amazing life while serving his country. I mean, what you've given back to this country, you've done everything they've asked from you with a smile on your face because you're out there flying these cool jets, and now you've got an airline career on top of it. So I think it's a great your career is a great testimony to what's available for people out there.
Yeah, I agree.
I have to just jump in and say here before we close the show out, he grew up a block away from me.
I literally delivered papers down to his house.
Are you kidding?
No,
Literally.
I am not kidding.
Yeah, we've talked about it. It's mind blowing. It's so humbling, in the whole Grumman family background, and I'm sure for Ray, it's something on Long Island. It's kind of a family show to say. It really is the roots of naval aviation on the Grumman aerospace side of things. And Jeter, your career is just absolutely amazing, legendary, and for all us diehard Tomcat fans out there, I just want to throw out there that incredible amount of hours in the airframe. But I just want to add that 2,000 plus hours in the Hornet, there's got to be a third of them were on the tanker, everybody. So that's fine.
Yeah, no, it's not a joke.
I do have
or hawking the tanker.
I guess more of a keyboard warrior question for you. A slick Hornet, 5,000 feet, a slick TF-30 F14A Tomcat at 5,000 feet. Pushed them both to burner. Zone 5 TF-30. I guess we'll say Max AB in the Legacy Hornet. Which one's going to leave you with a smile at the end of the day?
Well, you know what, and I hate to say it, but it's one of those it depends things, right? Dogfighting arena is so intolerant of any mistakes, and a well-fought Tomcat could definitely do some good work in that case. I would tell you that you get into the books and you look at the EM diagrams and whatnot, and the Hornet's going to come out on top from a numbers perspective. But I'm not saying that the right guy in the Tomcat can't stay in that either.
Tactics win every time, right? That's the truth there. But amazing career, man. It's absolutely awesome. And I do want to also add in there, your brother, younger brother, flew Grumman EA-6B Prowler for, I believe, the United States Marine Corps, correct?
Yep.
Nice.
What a Grumman legacy here, and it's an honor to have you. It really is. And
Thank you very much.
Bravo. All you guys, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You can catch us on Instagram at F14 Tomcat, and you can find the merch link there. You can support the shows. And a big hello to everyone out there on Instagram listening. Also, YouTube, F14 Calverton, All Things Grumman, where you're probably watching this right now. Find us on Facebook, the F14 Tomcat Radio Show. Discord at F14 Tomcat. And catch the shows on Apple or Spotify podcast. Also, I want to give a shout out to the museums real quick. Valiant Air Command with the VF-41 Black Aces in Florida. You got something to do this winter? There's some amazing Tomcats out there. There's some amazing history out there. You got Hickory Aviation Museum with a VF-31 Tomcat, Last Cruise Siphon. I believe that's 107 sitting there.
Yep. Had my name on that set at one point too.
Wildwood Museum in New Jersey with their VF-103 Jolly Roger. You have Cradle Aviation has number 3, Felix 101 as well. Kalamazoo Air Mizzou in Michigan, VF-84 Jolly Roger. Tom, your hands had to have been on that airplane. Snort delivered that himself with John Ellis. So again, incredible history out there. I want to thank you guys once again, and have a great night, everyone. Enjoy.
Thank you. Good night.